Welcome everyone to the Canadian Ecopsychology Network monthly virtual gathering. Hello, my name is Carol Cozio and I'm the founder of the Canadian Ecopsychology Network, the host of the series. Today, we have Tal Davidson going to share some thoughts about decolonial reflections on ecopsychology's relationship to technology. Tal Davidson is a PhD student in the Historical, Theoretical, and Critical Studies of Psychology program at York University in Toronto. His current research explores ecopsychology as a framework that combines social and ecological justice with personal healing and psychotherapeutics. He is also a project manager at Psychology's Feminist Voices, as well as a musician steeped in the worlds of jazz and in improvisation. And I've been privileged to enjoy some of Tal's musical extraordinary capabilities around a campfire. So thank you very much, Tal, for coming today and for sharing your wisdom. And I'm going to turn the airwaves over to you.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Carol. Hi, everybody. I'll just start by saying that I'm really humbled to see faces I recognize and faces I don't tuning in to hear me. I've been really nervous for this because I'm a graduate student. I'm kind of new to psychology in the first place, given the kind of span of time it occupies. But ecopsychology has become
Tally, we're getting a little bit of a choppiness.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, so...
Okay, give me a second to see if I can just get myself in the next room over real quick.
Okay, I'm gonna...
Yeah, so what I was saying was that I've been working really hard to familiarize myself with what ecopsychology is in the past little while, just soaking it up from as many sources as possible. And this is a paper that I felt moved to write because I have a really long-standing kind of adversarial relationship with technology. And I've been finding that ecopsychology has been helping me give voice to that. But because I'm also new to this, I can't quite let it flow through me in the kind of storytelling way that I prefer to conduct these kinds of things. So I will be reading from the paper I've been writing. I hope that's okay. I actually think that Zoom is uniquely better for this kind of thing than in person in a lot of ways, because you can kind of like just be in the space you're in and not have to sit in an audience of people. But yeah, let me get this going over here. So I'll just like read my little introductory notes and then get into it, breeze through parts that might end up being redundant for the sake of time. And I really look forward to the discussion we can have afterwards. So the full title for this talk was actually, if we are a technological species, then what species am I? So I will argue that an ecological conscience invites critical evaluation of what it means to be a technological species and question the degree to which our status as a technological species demands expression through technology that relies on ecosystem disruption, extensive global trade networks, manufactured desire, and other more insidious components of mass culture. And I'll spend the first part trying to very carefully construct technology as I see it being understood in certain area of ecopsychology. And I really want to do it justice so that we can really be clear on what I'm noticing and critiquing, because I really don't want to um, just create a polemic, against some like straw version of how technology is construed by eco-psychologists. I also think that ecopsychology, um, the journal itself, is remarkable for hosting such a diverse range of perspectives. The decolonial stuff is really present. The embodied is really present, but I also um, kind of have a response of pushing away when I read some of the work that tries to use technology for the purpose of nature connection without a certain critical edge that I feel is missing. So gratitude to ecopsychology, and I hope to be just bringing in another aspect of the discussion, or um, inserting a bit of critique that we can talk about and see where it goes. So in this first part, I'll just outline the construction of technology and eco-psychology as I understand it. So the first place I encountered the notion that advanced technology was part of our nature was in the Peter Kahn and Patricia Hasbach book, Eco-Psychology, Science Totems, and the Technological Species. In its introduction, the authors explained their intention to address an oversight in eco-psychology that held the discipline back in the Romantic era of the 1960s counterculture. They delineate a first generation of eco-psychology that was countercultural in the sense that it stood in opposition to a culture of science whose reductionism and materialism they believed enabled exploitation of nature, which included landscapes, people, and societies. As such, first generation eco-psychology was said to have reified a binary between nature and science that Kahn and Hasbach reject. Instead, they offer an eco-psychology that remains committed to a mystical vision of nature, but at the same time, it doesn't see that as inherently limiting the application of science and technology to the study of the human-nature relationship. In fact, they view science and technology as an extension of human nature. And in their words, technology is developing rapidly because, quote, we love it, we create it, and we are drawn to it. Hence, we are the technological species. So this term, the technological species, comes up a number of times across Kahn's writing specifically, I've noticed. He explains the evidence behind it in several texts. It goes back to Homo habilis and the birth of stone tools, to Homo erectus and the harnessing of fire. It follows with a refining of projectile tools, agriculture, masonry, and machinery. And this continuous progression of innovation has culminated in the technology of today: computation, medical miracles, and the space age. Building on top of our horizon of creations is said to be inseparable from our evolution as a species. Thus, when eco-psychologists criticize science and technology on principle, they mistake the items we invent with the context in which they are used. Rejecting technology as an extension of science idolatry constitutes a rejection of human-specific nature. It is inevitable that humans will invent. It is not inevitable that those inventions will depend on ecological harm or that they will distance us from connection to the earth. And again, this is me tracing the way I am noticing technology being constructed in the literature. So this technological view of humans constructs technology in a pretty wide way, I'm noticing. Arrowheads and iPhones both count. Technology is rendered as any product of ingenuity that changes the ways humans interact with their environments. It also implies innovation. Technological knowledge compounds. The history of tools can be lined up like the march of progress, like, from the ape up to the human. And inventions become more sophisticated as we learn more about the material makeup of our world. We're not a technological species because we keep using the same technology either. It's because we're constantly building on what we have. And so there is a certain dissatisfaction that's built into this. We're constructed as a species, hardwired not only to manipulate materials into objects that serve a technical purpose, but to also do it out of some dissatisfaction with what's available to us in the present. And finally, because we are a technological species, marching technology forward is a global project. The impulse that birthed the birch bark canoe on Turtle Island is the same one that birthed penicillin in London, England. technological progress, not simply the tools themselves, is constructed as an endemic part of human life. So how does this construction of technology get reflected in ecopsychology? And furthermore, what constructions of ecopsychology does that then feed into enabling? For one, I think it creates the possibility of conceiving technology that facilitates some of the goals of ecopsychology, like improving health through nature connection and inspiring nature-connected behavior, such as conservation advocacy, things like that. And then reciprocally, it also reinforces a version of ecopsychology that prioritizes the development of technology that facilitates nature connection. So in my paper, this is the part where I review a bunch of ecopsychological work that takes that technological nature approach. But for the sake of this talk, I'm just going to cite a couple of examples. So Kahn has a couple of examples. In one study, he compares the effects of real and digital windows on recovery from stress, the digital window being just like a flat screen that's projecting a live stream of the outdoors of an office building. So they not only found that the real window was more restorative than a screen live streaming the same outdoor space, but that the screen had an equal restorative quality to a blank wall. So having the screen and having a blank wall both did little to reduce physiological measures of stress, unlike a real window. But after 6 weeks of having a digital window integrated into a windowless workspace, office staff revealed in interviews that they appreciated its presence. They felt refreshed and connected after gazing at it, and they would recommend it to others. Similarly, an earlier set of studies by Kahn and colleagues revealed that robotic dogs elicited less interaction from children than real dogs, but that children and adults still imbued them with some sort of animacy that we associate with animal companionship. The authors positioned their results as a cautionary indication that people seem to get accustomed to technological substitutions of nature, despite evidence that our bodies respond to it more poorly. However, rather than following a path from this finding to a position that seeking contact with nature through technology might be dangerously misdirected, Kahn follows his belief that we are inevitably entwined with sophisticated technology and that the problem is not in its existence, but in its application. He conceptualizes a set of benchmarks to qualify whether technological nature supports the building of ecological conscience. And these benchmarks orbit around the idea that technology should not substitute experiences of nature, but should instead bring us into deeper communion with the land itself. And so the impulse to create and interact with sophisticated tools needs to be harnessed and directed into a direction that promotes attunement to the land, a sort of wild sensitivity. So he lists binoculars, hiking boots, but also field guide apps and cars being examples of technological nature. And I have a few more examples, but maybe I'll skip them for the sake of time. And if people want to go more into that, we can do that. I'll move on to the second part of the paper, which is a kind of response to a response to this construction of technology. So in this part, I will interpret this construction of technology from a decolonial perspective. My critiques can be boiled down to one fundamental discomfort I have with this conceptualization of technology, namely that it implicates all of us as a species in a project of cumulative technological development and does not account for history's role in shaping the production, distribution, and progression of technology in our world. We did not follow a straight course from Neolithic tools to modern computation. Technology evolves in response to the needs of the historically specific societies it comes from. A piece of technology's invention, acceptability, and propagation requires subjectivities that can accommodate for its usefulness and production. To my mind, working with technology ahistorically undermines the deeper intentions behind ecopsychology. How can technology, such as cars and computers, bring us into closer relationship with the more than human world without addressing the more than human participation that their production requires? How can we be sure that our species is the technological one when the propagation of high technology, I refer to you know, I guess I see technology like an axe being distinct from a technology like an iPhone or a computer. So I'll refer to it as high technology just for short. So how can we be sure our species is a technological one when the propagation of high technology is historically entwined with the legacies of colonialism and capitalism, social forces that are certainly not ubiquitous in our species? And if ecopsychology strives to lift an ecological conscience higher within human subjectivity, how does that reconcile with the foisting of the technological regime of the global north onto indigenous societies and the lands to which they are related? So my first question asks us to consider the ways technology is networked through the world. What does it take for a webcam to come into existence, to get perched up near an eagle's nest and fed through the internet to your computer screen? How much energy has to be expended? How many raw materials had to be extracted? How much deliberate psychology hacking did the marketing world have to enact? How enormous a trade network needed to be in place? How many labor laws had to be bent for the production of one webcam to be profitable? How many other products needed to be made and shipped for the silica mines and oil fields to support their own overhead? Our consumer technology is embedded in deep structures of ecological exploitation, and there's currently no way around that. I don't want to be understood as moralizing naively about technology as an unambiguous source of harm. I'm talking to you through a computer right now. Rather, I bring this up because it is hard for me to wonder about how high technology could serve ecopsychology without reckoning with its inextricability from the systems that create the necessity for ecopsychology in the first place. If ecopsychology is about merging the work towards intrapsychic harmony with ecological principles of gratitude, stewardship, and sensitivity to one's place in the Earth community, then the value of high technology needs to be queried from a much earlier place than the mere fact of its existence. We need to explore whether participating in consumption is a permissible step in getting us closer to nature, or whether capitulating to the inevitability of high technology requires us to deaden ourselves from feeling for the areas of life that it ravages. This is not a false dichotomy. Ecopsychology is a discipline that invites us to work with the pain of the world, and technology is unfortunately a product of great pain. I wonder if working with this pain, we would move away from technology in ways that feel like progress rather than regression to quote unquote old ways. Conversely, I find it difficult to believe that high technology can uproot us from extractivism. In a world without extractivism, there will be no local smartphone artisans. In response to the claim that we, quote, cannot go back to older ways of life, which are present in a lot of these technological ecopsychology discourses, I don't think that a world without smartphones has to be, or even can be, a step back. This, too, is an erroneous understanding of history and an iteration of what the late cultural theorist Mark Fisher calls capitalist realism, the conviction that only coherent ways of organizing society is some semblance of capitalism, that there are no true viable alternatives to capitalism. We can't imagine ourselves out of capitalism. And I think that the ubiquity of high technology is both powered by capitalist realism and powers its own realism that will that it will always be with us. That because technology is everywhere and because we're invested so much into growing it, it's part of us. It comes from somewhere deeper than history. It's just we're always going to have it. And this is a form of naturalization. And technology's naturalization in our lives is what allows us to make statements like making technology an enemy would be making ecopsychology largely irrelevant to most everybody in the world today, which comes from that intro to the Kahn and Hasbach book. This is where biologist Paul Ehrlich's assertion that ecology is, quote, the subversive science is germane. Ecopsychology is a mode of reconsidering our place in the natural world. The claim of our technological specieshood accepts a colonial techno-scientific version before we even get to the eco part in ecopsychology. It is an aspect of our shifting baseline of nature. It is everywhere, so it gets taken as what it is, as what is. The apparent naturalness of technology is predicated on its integration into the baseline of our lives in the global north. In many indigenous societies, high technology has been an imposition in the strongest sense. What does the term technological species imply about societies that did not develop and even actively resisted industrial modes of production? Are they arrested at an earlier stage of development? Are they denying a fundamental quality of their species, like some ecopsychologists are said to be doing? Or is it that consumer technology is difficult to conceive of, let alone validate, in societies whose realities are much more rooted in a relational understanding of life? Anthropologist Arturo Escobar suggests it's the latter. He describes indigenous communities of the global South as inhabiting a world of, quote, relational ontology, a world that is enacted minute by minute, day by day, through an infinite set of practices carried out by all kinds of beings and life forms. The people are amongst these beings, and awareness of how their actions enact the world is therefore front and center. This is echoed beautifully in Potawatomi ecologist Robin Wall Kimmerer's reflections on the gift economy in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. In a relational world, a wild strawberry cannot be bought or sold. It is a being that presents itself as a gift, and it fills you up with inspiration and commitment to pay that gift forward. Paying back gratitude is not like paying money. It does not come from a calculated exchange of property, but from a whole-bodied movement towards honoring the world that gifts you. She writes, quote, "From the viewpoint of a private property economy, the gift is deemed to be free because we obtain it free of charge at no cost. But in the gift economy, gifts are not free. The essence of a gift is that it creates a set of relationships," end quote. In a gift economy, there's no sense to the idea of marking off land and trampling relations on a grand scale to produce items that then enter the economy as units of private property. Technology would not be possible in a way that it exists today. I would say that this absence demonstrates that enacting our human nature does not at all require embracing the northern pace of technological growth, and in fact, that ecopsychology's intentions are more aligned with relational ontologies that challenge technological growth than they are with attempts to integrate it. Here I'm inspired by Andy Fisher's position that indigenous decolonization offers ecopsychology an integrated framework for conceptualizing individual, social, and ecological healing. In a recent article, Fisher explains that colonialism is enacted by a society whose members are themselves colonized by conditions that interrupt their resonance with the living world. These are the conditions of capitalist life, and they include the pressures of achieving financial stability, the necessity of protecting individual interests and property, and an orientation to the world, including people, as a geography of resources that can be appropriated and converted into capital. The psychology of capitalist life is a substrate of colonial politics. It is also a psychology of great suffering and restlessness, something I would bet many of us here identify with, hence our effort of bringing in more relational ways of being into our lives. Given the reciprocal quality of indigenous colonization and settler colonization, healing one also implies healing the other. For settlers, indigenous allyship requires healing from the patterns that capitalism has inscribed in us. I bring this up because I worry that bringing high technology into the repertoire of ecopsychological methods without deep consideration of its place in the world undermines both sides of this coin. For one, it endorses the use of items whose existence is now and always predicated on colonial practices. This presents a challenge for the step we take after seeing an eagle in her nest, the one where we are moved to gratitude, to beholding the deep relationality of all things, and to understanding where we stand in the grand network of the Earth community. Secondly, interacting with nature via technology can offer only a very limited challenge to the separation between people and nature that defines capitalist subjectivity. This is because it reifies nature as a category of wilderness and out there-ness, when in fact it is everywhere. And if anyone wants to find the closest bit of nature to them while they're surrounded by plaster walls, all they need to do is feel into their own bodies. So to conclude, I want to state that I know all of this is really messy. Taking a hard stance on advanced technology is not very inviting a proposition when it's also what feeds us, it's what is connecting us with people right now, with information, for many people, the natural world. And it keeps us in what we've learned to consider, at least, as good health. I'm not proposing to extricate ourselves from all of that as a form of protest. Instead, I'm following the thread of my idealism and suggesting that eco-psychology can be the place we go to heal, so that extrication doesn't feel like a protest, but inspiration. We're already consigned to live inextricably with technology and capitalism in our daily lives as it is. I would like eco-psychology to be a practice of building a subjectivity outside of that. I see it as a format for growing comfortable with our deeply relational existence, so that when it comes time to make choices that can dislodge us from reenacting capitalism, we do it out of relief rather than a burdensome sense of duty. Thank you.
Thank you, Tal.